100 Affirmations inspired by the biblical stories and wisdom of Moses and the Israelites. I shall trust in the Lord, as Moses trusted him to part the Red Sea. By God's grace, I am empowered to lead others to freedom, just as Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. The Lord is my strength and my shield, even as Moses found strength in him to confront Pharaoh. I am fearfully and wonderfully made, for God spoke to Moses through a burning bush. I shall obey God's commandments, just as Moses followed his laws faithfully. As Moses spoke to the Israelites, I will declare God's words with conviction and authority. The Lord will provide for me in times of need, as he provided manna for Moses and the Israelites. I shall trust in God's guidance, for he led Moses through the wilderness. By God's power, I will overcome any obstacles in my path, just as Moses overcame the plagues of Egypt. I am called to be a vessel of God's justice and mercy, like Moses who confronted Pharaoh. The Lord's promises are true and steadfast, as Moses witnessed the fulfillment of God's covenant. I will stand firm in my faith, as Moses stood before the Israelites as a prophet of God. God's wisdom shall flow through me, even as it flowed through Moses when he spoke to Pharaoh. I am chosen by God for a specific purpose, just as Moses was chosen to deliver his people. I shall have courage in the face of adversity, for Moses faced the wrath of Pharaoh but remained steadfast. The Lord hears my prayers, as he heard Moses when he interceded on behalf of the Israelites. I will walk in humility, for Moses was known as the meekest man on earth. God's presence shall go with me, just as his presence guided Moses through the wilderness. I am called to lead others towards the promised land, as Moses led the Israelites. I will be patient and trust in God's timing, for Moses waited before leading the Israelites out of Egypt. The Lord will fight for me, even as he fought for Moses and the Israelites against their enemies. I shall honor and respect God's law, for Moses received the commandments on Mount Sinai. By God's grace, I am forgiven and redeemed, just as Moses interceded for the Israelites' sins. I will trust in God's provision, for Moses struck the rock and water flowed in the wilderness. I am called to be a voice of truth and righteousness, like Moses who confronted Pharaoh's wickedness. The Lord will equip me for every task He sets before me, just as He equipped Moses to lead His people. I will trust in God's miracles, for Moses witnessed the turning of the Nile into blood. I am a child of God, like Moses who was saved from the waters of the Nile. The Lord's presence will go before me, just as His presence went before Moses and the Israelites. I shall declare God's glory to the nations, as Moses declared His power to Pharaoh. I will have faith in God's promises, even when the odds seem impossible, as Moses did. The Lord is my deliverer, as He delivered Moses and the Israelites from the hands of their oppressors. I am called to be a peacemaker, just as Moses mediated between the Israelites during disputes. I will trust in God's faithfulness, for He fulfilled His covenant with Moses and the Israelites. The Lord will reveal His plans to me, as He revealed His plans to Moses on Mount Sinai. I shall be obedient to God's commands, for Moses followed them with reverence and devotion. I will be a light to others, just as Moses' face radiated with God's glory on Mount Sinai. The Lord's grace is sufficient for me, as it was for Moses when he made intercession for the Israelites. I am called to lead others out of bondage, just as Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. I will seek God's wisdom in all things, as Moses sought His guidance during the Israelites' journey. The Lord is my refuge and strength, even as He protected Moses from Pharaoh's wrath. I shall walk in God's ways, for Moses followed His commandments and statutes. I will trust in God's divine plan for my life, just as Moses trusted Him in leading the Israelites. I am an instrument of God's power, as Moses wielded his staff to perform miracles. The Lord will make a way where there seems to be no way, as He did for Moses at the Red Sea. I shall proclaim God's love and mercy, for Moses witnessed His compassion towards the Israelites. I will have faith in God's providence, as Moses had faith in His provision throughout their journey. The Lord's promises are my inheritance, as they were for Moses and the Israelites in the Promised Land. I am called to be a blessing to others, just as Moses was a blessing to the nation of Israel. I will trust in God's sovereignty, for he directed every step of Moses' life and ministry. The Lord's word is a lamp unto my feet, as it was for Moses guiding the Israelites through the wilderness. I shall be patient in waiting for God's timing, just as Moses waited upon the Lord's instructions. I will seek God's face in times of trouble, as Moses sought his guidance during the Israelites' trials. The Lord's love endures forever, as Moses proclaimed in his songs of praise. I am called to be a servant leader, like Moses who served both God and the people of Israel. I will trust in God's strength, as Moses trusted him to overcome Pharaoh's armies. I shall be steadfast in my faith, just as Moses remained faithful to God's commands. The Lord will never leave nor forsake me, as he never abandoned Moses and the Israelites. I will bear witness to God's miracles, just as Moses witnessed the plagues of Egypt. I am called to intercede for others in prayer, as Moses interceded for the Israelites before God. I shall be a vessel of God's grace and mercy, even as Moses pleaded for forgiveness on behalf of the people. The Lord is my rock and my fortress, as he was for Moses in the face of adversity. I will trust in God's guidance, as Moses trusted him to lead the Israelites to the promised land. I am a messenger of God's truth, like Moses who received his commandments for the people. I shall proclaim God's faithfulness to the generations, just as Moses declared it to the Israelites. The Lord's plans for me are good and not evil, just as his plans were for Moses and the Israelites. I will walk in humility before God, for Moses humbled himself before the presence of the Almighty. I shall have courage to face giants, as Moses faced the giants in the land of Canaan. The Lord's mercy is abundant, as he showed mercy to Moses even in his moments of doubt. I am called to be a leader with integrity, just as Moses led with integrity and righteousness. I will trust in God's deliverance, as Moses trusted him to deliver the Israelites from slavery. I shall give thanks to the Lord in all circumstances, for Moses praised him in every triumph and trial. I will honor God with my words and actions, as Moses honored him in his obedience. The Lord will provide wisdom in times of decision-making, as he provided wisdom to Moses. I am called to be a beacon of hope, just as Moses brought hope to the Israelites in their darkest hours. I will trust in God's everlasting love, for He loved Moses and the Israelites with an enduring love. I shall be a voice for justice, as Moses confronted Pharaoh and championed the cause of the oppressed. The Lord's peace will guard my heart and mind, as it guarded Moses' heart amidst turmoil. I will seek God's face in times of uncertainty, just as Moses sought His face on Mount Sinai. I am chosen and set apart by God, as Moses was chosen to fulfill His divine purposes. I shall trust in God's provision, for He sustained Moses and the Israelites throughout their journey. I will trust in God's power to perform miracles, as Moses witnessed the wonders of the Almighty. The Lord is my shepherd, as He shepherded Moses and guided him in leading the Israelites. I am called to be a witness of God's faithfulness, just as Moses witnessed His faithfulness firsthand. I will stand firm on the promises of God, for Moses stood firm on God's promises to him. I shall seek God's face diligently, as Moses sought Him in the tent of meeting. The Lord's grace is sufficient for me, as it was for Moses in times of weakness. I will trust in God's redemption, as Moses led the Israelites towards the land of promise. I am a recipient of God's mercy and grace, just as Moses experienced His mercy and grace. I shall be a vessel of God's healing, like Moses who brought healing through his obedience. The Lord will fight my battles, as He fought for Moses and the Israelites against their enemies. I will trust in God's faithfulness, for He remained faithful to Moses even when he faltered. I am called to persevere in faith, just as Moses persevered through trials and tribulations. I will seek God's face in times of decision-making, as Moses sought His guidance in leading the people. The Lord's mercy is renewed every morning, as He renewed His covenant with Moses daily. I shall be a channel of God's deliverance, just as Moses delivered the Israelites from bondage. I will trust in God's timing and plans, as Moses trusted Him to bring the Israelites into the promised land. I am called to walk in obedience, just as Moses walked in obedience to God's commands. I will praise the Lord for His mighty works, as Moses praised Him for His deliverance. The Lord's favor rests upon me, as it rested upon Moses when he stood before Pharaoh. May these affirmations based on the stories and words of Moses inspire and encourage you in your journey of faith. Thank you for affirming with God, Candy. I'll see you in the next video. Meanwhile, remember that you are a sweet expression of God and that you deserve the best because you are the best.